Alright, so there's obviously other types of equations here as well. So we're going to look over that. 1.5 is the other types of equations that we missed. So you can solve equations by grouping as well. So if you want to solve this, we can factor it by grouping, which is what we talked about, and then solve it. So this first area over here, you can take an x squared out of both of them. And when you do that, you're left with 1x in the front and a positive 2. But when you factor by grouping, you need to make these two items look the same. So I can take a negative 1 out of this grouping, and I'm left with an x plus 2. So now when I combine it together, that is an x squared and a negative 1, which gives me an x squared minus 1, and the x plus 2 drops down as well, and that equals 0. So when I go to solve, I set the front equal to 0 and the back equal to 0. So to solve this, I'd add 1 to both sides. So I get x squared equals 1. I square root both sides, and I get plus or minus 1. Over here, I'd minus 2 to both sides, and I get negative 2. So remember, this was a cubed, so it's 1, 2, 3 answers. So those are my 3 answers. So you can also solve equations by factoring by grouping. So solving something like this, I know you look at this as well, and it doesn't make any sense to you. So here's what we're going to do. Let's put everything on one side together, so we end up with x to the 3 halves minus x to the 1 half equals 0. They all have a half in them. So what we're going to do is we are going to pull out by separating here. Notice how I just rewrote this as 2 over 2 and 1 over 2, because remember, you add exponents. 2 plus 1 is 3. Now you see that they both have a half you can pull out. So I'm pulling that half out of both of them. So an x to the half is pulled out. I'm left with x to the 2 over 2 minus 1, because when I take this out, I still have to hold the place marker with a 1 there. Well, 2 over 2 is just 1, so it's really x to the 1 half times x minus 1. So when I separate those and set them equal to 0, there's that one. I would square it. Well, whenever you square 0, you get 0. And x minus 1 equals 0. I'd add 1 to both sides, and I get x equals 1 as my answer. So those are my 2 answers. Solving equations containing radicals. So example 3. This is the cube root. So to get rid of the cube root, the opposite is cubing both sides. That'll get rid of the cube root, right? So I actually have x squared minus 1, 2 to the third equals 8, right? So x squared minus 1 equals 8. Because the opposite of cube rooting something is the cube. The opposite of fourth root is the fourth power. The opposite of fifth root is the fifth power, and so on. So to solve this, I add 1 to both sides. So we got x squared equals 9. I square root both sides, and I get plus or minus 3. Because remember, whenever you square root something, there's 2 answers, a plus and a minus.
Yes, destiny has her hand on my back.
Alright, with this one, let's get the root all by itself. We already kind of talked about these, so I'm going to subtract that 3 onto this side, because now I have the square root all by itself, and an x minus 3 on that side. So to get rid of a square root, I'm going to square both sides, but remember, you have to square the entire side. So all I have left on that side is that 3x plus 1, but on this side I have an x minus 3 squared. Now once again, you can't just square each item. This means you have to write it out twice. So it's x minus 3 and x minus 3. So let us FOIL. That's an x squared, and let's see here. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. That is a negative 3x, and that is a positive 9. So we combine our like terms. I got an x squared minus 6x plus 9, and I have a 3x plus 1 still on this side. So because it's quadratic, I'm going to move everything over to the right, because this is a positive. I want to make it a positive quadratic. So when I do that, those cancel out, and I have a negative 9x now. I'm going to move the 1 over as well, and that is me 0 equals x squared minus 9x plus 8. So can you think of two numbers that multiply to give you 8 that add to give you negative 9?
This disk will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
I know I can, right? what multiplies to give you 8 that adds to give you negative 9? Negative 1 and negative 8, right? Because negative 1 times negative 8 is 8. Negative 1 plus negative 8 is negative 9. So negative 1, negative 8, just set each of those equal to 0 and solve. So x minus 1 equals 0, x minus 8 equals 0. I add 1 to both sides, so I get x equals 1. I add 8 to both sides, and I get x equals 8 as my answer.
It's here at last. The new Dick Tracy two-way wrist radio.
Example 5. These are the more challenging ones, but just like before, you want to get one root on one side all by itself. So to make this as simple as possible, I'm going to add that root over to that side. Okay. And I'm going to subtract that too, because now I have this root all by itself. If I wanted to, I guess I could have squared right there because that root was already by itself, but you want to get one square root by itself. Now you can square, but you got to square everything even on that side. Well, this is fine now. We got rid of one of the roots. It's a 2x minus 3, and now I have in parentheses a square root of x plus 7 minus 2. I have to write that out twice, which means there is some crazy foiling to do here next coming up.
Just a reminder, fans, about Die Hard Night coming up here at the station.
Alright, so square root of x plus 7 times square root of x plus 7. Remember, when you have the same thing underneath two square roots, all you get is what was underneath, so that's an x plus 7. Square root of x plus 7 times negative 2 is negative 2 square root of x plus 7. Negative 2 times square root of x plus 7 is another negative 2 square root of x plus 7. And negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. So if you have negative 2 of these and negative 2 of these, you actually have negative 4 of those. So when I go to combine my like terms here, what I'm going to do is, once again, I'm going to try to get this root all by itself, if possible. So 7 and 4 is 11. And let's move this stuff over to this side. I have a negative x, so there's an x. I still have the minus 3, I still have the 11, the negative 4, so now I'm going to minus this 11 to get that over there. So x minus 14 equals negative 4 square root of x plus 7. And if the only way to get rid of that negative 4 is divide by it, so I'm going to get a crazy fraction. So instead of getting a crazy fraction, all I'm going to do here is square both sides, because that'll get rid of this. So when I square both sides, that gives me an x minus 14 and x minus 14. And this right here, I take that squared through, right? When you take the square through, that'll give me a 16. And then that will get rid of that root. So actually what I end up with is x times x is x squared. X times negative 14 is negative 14. Negative 14 times negative 14, or negative 14 times x is negative 14x. Negative 14 times negative 14 is 196. And that is now 16, and that is x plus 7. So you foil that through.
I love disco, and I hear it's making a comeback.
So all that was on that side, and I take that 16 through, and this is what I have. So I combine my like terms to get a negative 28x. And because it's quadratic, I got to move all my x's onto one side. So minus a 16x to get all my x's on one side. So I have x squared minus 44x plus 196 equals 112. I'm going to move that 112 over because once again it's a quadratic. So can I think of numbers to factor this? You think of two numbers that multiply to give you 88 to add to give you negative 44. Off the top of my head, negative 42 and negative 2 work. No, hold on 1 second. It's not going to work. Okay, that was the problem. The problem was that it was actually 84, not 88. So now what works, it's negative 42 and negative 2. So it's x minus 42 and x minus 2. So when you separate each of those to set them equal to 0, you add 42 to both sides, you get x equals 42. You add 2 to both sides there, and you get x equals 2 as your answer. And we'll try to finish this up when we come back.